This is every single fight to make after UFC 292 Sterling versus O'Malley. I have all of the key fighters from that card on the screen right now. Some winners, some losers, and you may notice there is an empty box next to all of them, and that's where their next opponent's going to go, who I have hidden around the perimeter of the screen. I'll slowly reveal those opponents one by one as the video goes on and place them where they belong on the screen. Let's start straight away with the main event winner, the new bantamweight world champion, Sean O'Malley. Crazy that I'm saying these words right now. I never thought I would, but congratulations to Sean O'Malley. He puts away Aljamain Sterling by second round TKO, and he calls out Marlon Vera on the microphone. This is a no-brainer in my opinion. He called him out on the mic. Marlon Vera's already talked about it as well. There is that beef between them because Marlon Vera, of course, has a win on paper over Sean O'Malley that O'Malley denies because, of course, it was a little bit fluky. Let's be real. It was a perennial nerve kick. That's not going to happen 99 out of 100 times. It's going to happen 1 out of 100 times. But this is a good matchup, especially because Marlon Vera's pretty much unfinishable, and O'Malley's got a knack of finishing opponents. So if O'Malley doesn't finish Marlon Vera, and it's a 5-rounder in a championship fight, it's an interesting matchup, right? Even though you would say, oh, O'Malley's way better than him, he's a way better striker, he's way faster, he's way more dynamic. Marlon Vera has been improving since that first fight with Sean O'Malley. So has Sean O'Malley, of course. But it's interesting to see over a 5-rounder because if Marlon Vera doesn't go anywhere and O'Malley's now in the 4th and 5th round still trying to keep up with landing on Marlon Vera and Marlon Vera's just walking him down, all of a sudden it's like this ominous, exciting fight that goes on where we're waiting to see if O'Malley's going to be able to either finish Marlon Vera early, which no one's able to do, so it would be stunning if he could, but then also if O'Malley can survive the onslaught of basically the bantamweight terminator Marlon Vera, who just non-stop keeps up that pressure and non-stop walks down his opponent. So it's a really interesting matchup, and the only reason I'm okay with this, I know that Corey Sandhagen beat Marlon Vera. If Sean O'Malley was saying, I'm going to take the rest of the year off, celebrate my win, and I'll be back in March next year or February next year. I'll be back in 6 months, 5 months' time. Then I'd be like, oh, well, Corey Sandhagen should get the title shot then because he'll be recovered by then. But because he's being active, you can understand why they can actually make this matchup. They're not going to give Aljamain Sterling a rematch under any... Because at the end of the day, it wasn't a competitive fight. You know what I mean? Like, sure, Aljo might have edged round 1, but there was never any moments where Aljo was like beating up Sean O'Malley or really dominating the fight in any way whatsoever. And Sean O'Malley put him away in the second round. So Aljo's probably not getting a title shot. And let's be real, the UFC are like, phew, O'Malley beat Aljo, one of his worst style matchups. Now let's never go back to that again. You know what I mean? So they're not going to want to do it. And Corey Sandhagen's injured. So in December, we can make Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera. And I like this because Marlon Vera doesn't take damage no matter what happens in a fight, but it's not like he's injured or anything like that or got a broken nose, broken hand, anything like that after the fight with Pedro Munhoz. And Sean O'Malley's absolutely fresh after his fight with Aljamain Sterling. Took pretty much no damage whatsoever other than a couple of glancing shots that he got hit with. So Marlon Vera, Sean O'Malley makes absolute sense for December, only because it's in December though, and it is going to be a quick turnaround for Sean O'Malley, and the history is there, the beef is there. This is a massive, massive matchup that will sell a lot of pay-per-views, and now that O'Malley's won in the way that he did, his star power is like quadrupling overnight because of him becoming a world champion. Once you are like validated as a legit fighter, which is crazy to say because he's not validated when he's number 1 in the world, but this is how social media works, and this is how having a fan base works. You're only validated once you become a world champion. And I think boxing kind of ruined that for the minds of casual fans because they see a lot of belts in boxing, and only once someone touches one of those belts are they validated. It's a lot harder to be the best in the UFC as a UFC world champion. There ain't 4 belts per division. There's 1, and O'Malley's that one. So I think O'Malley versus Marlon Vera, he's validated himself to the casual fans. They're rallying behind him. He's got a ton of social media interaction, and activity is key here because everyone just saw him have a stunning performance. And then what? We're going to get a fight announcement within a month? That's just going to carry over the momentum and make a massive, massive matchup. And they're going to trash talk back and forth. Let's put it on the December card. And we could be looking at a December card of, listen to this, we've got all of these champions that want to fight before the end of the year. Sean O'Malley wants to fight in December. Volkanovski wants to fight in December. We've also got a situation where they have, Conor McGregor wants to fight in December against Michael Chandler. That's what he's saying the target date is. Then you've got Alex Pereira and Yuri Prohaska that want to fight in December. That could be maybe the best card of all time, and I'm all for it. We move on to the loser of the main event, Aljamain Sterling. Lost to Sean O'Malley. Sucks for Aljamain Sterling because he was right there on the cusp of greatness, and he would have had his super fight if he won. A lot of people are saying, I saw Full Violence make a post that said something like, now I want to see Aljo versus Sandhagen too. No, I don't want to see that whatsoever. At all. I think Sandhagen should just wait on the sidelines. We do Cejudo versus Merab in the meantime, and then Sandhagen can fight the winner of O'Malley versus Vera. If it's O'Malley, if it's Vera, whoever it is, Sandhagen should fight the winner when he's ready, and hopefully there's another quick turnaround where O'Malley's fighting in March or April of next year if he does beat Marlon Vera, or if Marlon Vera wins, the same situation. So Aljamain Sterling, I don't think he's going to fight at bantamweight. He's not going to fight Sandhagen. He can't fight Vera. Vera's probably getting a title shot. He's not going to get a rematch. He's not going to fight Yan again. That would cost him legacy if he was to mess that one up. He's already got a win over Piotr Yan. I'm sure he doesn't want to cancel out that legacy that he achieved on the odd chance that maybe Yan's going to catch him this time, because he is coming off a KO loss. And who else is there right now in the bantamweight division other than what? Umar Nurmagomedov? You think Aljo's going to be like, yeah, sign me up, I'll take on Umar? No. I think Aljamain Sterling should listen to me, Aljo. Your bantamweight legacy's done. You defended the belt a few times. Anything more you do at bantamweight other than getting the belt back is only going to be a stain on your legacy. If you lose any fight at bantamweight, you've got a great bantamweight legacy. Keep it, move on. Go to featherweight, take some time, bulk up, go to featherweight, eat good food, eat well. Holloway, if Volk remains champion in the featherweight division, they don't want Holloway just beating off these other featherweight contenders. I could have said anything other than beating off. They don't want Holloway beating these other featherweight contenders over and over again. So Aljo, I think you should be looking for the Holloway matchup. He's fighting the Korean Zombie this weekend, and I think he's going to beat the Korean Zombie. And this would be a matchup between two pound for pound non-champions, which is a really, really good fun fight. It'd be a great fight night main event. It'd be a great addition to the main card of a pay-per-view, maybe in January or February. Aljo's probably going to want to take some time off. He just had 2 fights back-to-back, so he's probably going to want to take some time off. He also just got TKO'd badly as well. So Aljamain Sterling, Max Holloway is the matchup that we all kind of... I think this makes the most sense. You know what I mean? This is Holloway, a big matchup for him, a pound-for-pound matchup for him as well. Someone in the pound-for-pound top 15 for him. And I like this more than Holloway versus, Giga Chikadze, an Ortega rematch. He's beaten Arnold Allen, you know what I mean? Like Ilya Topuria Holloway? No, Topuria is probably going to get a title shot now. So I think Aljamain Sterling versus Max Holloway would be a matchup. I think Holloway would win after seeing Aljo's performance against O'Malley, but it's a good style matchup for Aljamain Sterling. It's a better style matchup than a lot of those other top featherweight contenders, because maybe he can get the back of Holloway. Who knows? Aljamain Sterling, Max Holloway, if Holloway does beat TKZ, sounds like a great fight night main event in my opinion that would steal the show for that weekend. We move on to another fighter who won. Zhang Weili had such a dominant performance against Amanda Ribas. No. Amanda Lemos, an amazing performance against Amanda Lemos. And I think she should be looking to take on, of course, the number 3 ranked women's strawweight in the world that's coming off a wicked KO win over Jessica Andrade, Yan Xiaonan. Chinese, both of them. Go to China with them. UFC Fight Night Beijing. You know the UFC wanted to get into that market. They have the means to do it now. They have a champion in Zhang Weili who's Chinese. They have a contender who's Chinese in that division as well. One thing I'm sure China would be worried about is if Zhang Weili fought in China as the champion and then some Brazilian woman or some other type of woman beat her for the belt, and then they've got to be the champion, crowned champ in front of the Chinese crowd. That's not going to be good business. But in this way, no matter what happens in this fight, a champion will be Chinese by the end of it. You know what I mean? Zhang Weili or Yan Xiaonan will be a Chinese world champion. So regardless of the result, you have that sort of insurance plan and safety net that regardless, China's going to be really happy with the result. You know what I'm saying? So Zhang Weili, Yan Xiaonan in China, January, February, fight night card. I love women's title fights as a fight night main event. It makes me value them so much more than if they were on a pay-per-view main event or pay-per-view co-main event. I think it's good to give them their own show and their own weekend where they're going to be valued a lot more, where you feel like you're getting more for your buck. You know what I'm saying? So Zhang Weili, Yan Xiaonan, Chinese main event, UFC Fight Night Beijing in February, and then maybe do like a Li Jingliang versus someone who's got a bit of a name in the co-main event as well. We move on to another fighter, Ian Garry. The annoying one, okay? He called out Stephen Thompson. Dana White said Stephen Thompson turned down the fight. I don't believe him at all. I'm just going to say that right now. I think they're going to make the Stephen Thompson matchup. I think Ian Garry is a lovely matchup for Stephen Thompson. The only reason I could believe that Stephen Thompson would turn down that fight would be because he's already got conversations with Usman that are looking good, and maybe he's actually getting a top contender in the welterweight division. But seeing as Ian Garry called him out, that's a perfect addition to that December pay-per-view card. And if McGregor's on there and Ian Garry's on there, that's only going to increase his name value even more. So Ian Garry, Stephen Thompson, it's a winnable fight for both of them. And I know that sounds crazy, but Stephen Thompson's weakness on the feet is leg kicks. I picked Anthony Pettis to beat him by chopping apart those legs and KOing him. And what do you know, Anthony Pettis did it. I know it's a different version of Wonderboy, but is it really? I feel like Wonderboy is sort of maintaining how good he is into his old age. And that's sort of like the crazy thing about him is like, how is he still so good? Not is like, how is he getting better? You know what I mean? So Ian Garry, Stephen Thompson, there's a path to victory for Ian Garry, but there's also a chance for Stephen Thompson to absolutely show levels on the feet that maybe we don't even know are there yet, because it always seems that way with Stephen Thompson. You think there's a good striker? I'll bet. Here's Stephen Thompson. So either do it on the main card of a pay-per-view or as a fight night main event. Ian Garry, Stephen Thompson. I don't believe Dana White saying that that Stephen Thompson's already turned it down. I think he's just trying to say, look, see, guys, he didn't deserve his show money. You know what I mean? What happened to not making fights the night of the fight, Dana? You know what I'm saying? You never do that. But now all of a sudden, as soon as Ian Garry makes the call out on the post-fight speech, you're like, Stephen Thompson, you in? I'm sure Stephen Thompson didn't say no, but I'm just probably certain he didn't say yes because he's still weighing up his options. I don't think he said no. I just think he said, let me think about it. I'm not sure yet. I've got a few other matchups. And just didn't immediately say, yes, sign me up. So Ian Garry, Stephen Thompson, keep the momentum for Ian Garry going. The last thing we need is for him to be out for 8 months or he'll lose all of his hype. So he needs to keep momentum, stay active, and fight Stephen Thompson in December before the end of the year. An amazing matchup in the welterweight division. Or you could rebook him versus Jeff Neal. But seeing as Jeff Neal lost to Neil Magny by unanimous decision on one scorecard 30-27, let's go with a person who schooled Jeff Neal on the feet rather than Jeff Neal. You know what I mean? Like, who's going to be a better striking match for Ian Garry? The guy who got schooled by Neil Magny and Stephen Thompson, or the guy who's doing the schooling in Stephen Thompson? So let's do Stephen Thompson, Ian Garry, massive matchup. And maybe this time Ian Garry will be somewhat likable in the build-up because Stephen Thompson, you can't help but be likable against him. Or maybe he'll find some way of calling out Stephen Thompson. Who knows? I saw you littering in the street, so sit down, shut up, and don't ask any questions to Stephen Thompson. You know what I mean? Just because Stephen Thompson like dropped a sweet wrapper out of his pocket or something. You know what I mean? I can see Ian Garry doing that. But I think Ian Garry, Stephen Thompson should be the matchup that gets made. We move on to another fighter. Pedro Munhoz lost to Marlon Vera. I think he draws the short straw. There's been a guy who's been like, yeah, me and you, Marlon Vera. Shut up. Umar Nurmagomedov. You had your chance. You got injured. So you're not getting a top-level fight again. You know what I mean? They were going to make Pedro Munhoz versus Umar Nurmagomedov, but then they found a higher-ranked matchup in Sandhagen that was willing to take it. So they were like, okay, let's do Umar Nurmagomedov versus Corey Sandhagen instead. I think now you've got to sort of lower that down. He had his chance to get a jump up the rankings. He got injured. He's already been treated like really like differently, and he's been really spoiled by the UFC by getting that matchup. Hasn't yet beat a ranked opponent, and they're giving him the top contender nearly in Corey Sandhagen. So I think they should do Pedro Munhoz versus Umar Nurmagomedov when Pedro Munhoz is healed up, and of course when Umar is healed up from his shoulder injury as well. They're both going to be out for a similar amount of time, so I'm thinking we can see these guys fight around February of next year on a pay-per-view, prelim headliner maybe, or on a fight night main card, co-main event, feature fight. Pedro Munhoz Umar Nurmagomedov. I'm only doing this because I know Pedro Munhoz is such a G. He will take this fight. He's like the RDA of the bantamweight division. Good example, short, stocky, and I mean, fights a similar way, except with a bit less offensive takedowns. Pedro Munhoz, Umar Nurmagomedov, he'll take on anybody, and Umar's looking for anybody. So let's make that matchup happen. We move on to another fight up the card, which is Chris Weidman. Not a fight up the card, another fighter. He lost. I'm not going to match up Brad Tavares. I think he should have finished Chris Weidman, and I'm punishing him by not giving him any spotlight in this video, okay? But Chris Weidman said he wants to keep fighting. If he wants to keep fighting, someone who's going to need a little bit of time off because they took a lot of damage in round 3 of their fight at UFC 292 is Andre Petroski. Now, I wouldn't have matched these two up before, but I will say this. After watching Andre Petroski's performance against Gerald Meerschaert, this is a really winnable fight for Chris Weidman. Petroski does not throw low kicks at all. He was trying to do it against Meerschaert, but they weren't successful. He actually had quite bad low kicks. They were really slow and telegraphed. So I think this is actually a decently okay matchup for Chris Weidman. I would rather he retires from the sport. We don't need to see him keep on taking damage, but his pride is too much. He wants to probably go out on a win, or at least prove to his family that even after his injury, he can come back and get a win in the UFC. So I think this would be a good matchup for Weidman, and it'll be a chance for Petroski to get another bit of experience against an unranked fighter before we start giving him the real tests of the middleweight division, because he is 4-0 at middleweight, but after that Meerschaert performance, it was very clear he ain't ready for ranked opponents yet. So let's do Chris Weidman versus Andre Petroski. Winnable for both, but also a good test for both as well. I think that's the matchup that should take place, maybe somewhere on the northeast side of the US again. We move on to another fighter. Kurt Holobaugh won the Ultimate Fighter in the lightweight division, and Brad Katona won the Ultimate Fighter for the second time in the bantamweight division. Crazy from both of them. We need to find names for both of them to take on, and I think those names should be Terrence McKinney. We need names for them. You can't just give him any lightweight next or any bantamweight next. Christian Rodriguez. These are two guys who are in the unranked area of their divisions that are appropriate matchups after winning their debut. Of Katona and Holobaugh just won their debut. These are appropriate matchups outside of the rankings in their divisions. Terrence McKinney has a name. Christian Rodriguez has a name, and Katona and Holobaugh now have a ton of momentum because they just won the Ultimate Fighter. So I think keep the name value against each other and make sure that at least one of them wins and moves forward. If Terrence McKinney beats Kurt Holobaugh, one, people know who Holobaugh is rather than whatever that last guy was, Mike Breeden, and two, the winner's going to have a ton of hype as well. So I think Kurt Holobaugh, Terrence McKinney just got to finish with ease. Holobaugh just got to finish with ease as well. Not really with ease, but he didn't take much damage off of Hubbard. No cuts, no nothing like that. So I think he'll be looking to get right back in there, and I think put him against Terrence McKinney real soon. Plus, Holobaugh's really old, so I don't see him sitting out on the sidelines for very long. Also, Brad Katona just went to war. Christian Rodriguez just got injured against Cameron Simon at UFC 290 a month or two ago. So they might be looking to come back around the same time. They're both bantamweights, and they've both got some value in terms of their name. Of course, Christian Rodriguez was the guy that beat Raul Rosas Jr. Match them up against each other. We move on. Natalia Silva got a big win against Andrea Lee. I think she should make a quick turnaround on the November Brazil card, which is headlined by Almeida versus Blades. And I think they should make Amanda Ribas versus Natalia Silva. That's what I think should happen. Natalia Silva coming off a big win. Amanda Ribas is coming off a loss to Macy Barber. I think it's a winnable fight for Natalia Silva, especially because of her power in her hands in that women's flyweight division. And I think we need a bit of turnover for our Brazilian women's prospect in the flyweight division of the UFC. So, Natalia Silva, Amanda Ribas, these are all of the fights to make after UFC 292. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle Pip.